Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Sunday night story time with Skaaro the Red. And tonight we'll be presenting another chapter in the ridiculous Ballad of Skaaro the Red. Tonight we have chapter 14. Now, previously on the ridiculous Ballad of Skaaro the Red, Huijin and Captain Windblade were still traveling under the assumed names of Thurnin and Bonnie, and had just managed to evade their would-be assassins at Morgan's Inn and escaped from the haunted city of Valen. So tonight we once again join Bonnie and Thurnin in chapter 14 of the ridiculous Ballad of Skaaro the Red. Bonnie and Thurnin spent most of the evening walking westward along the coast. Although they were exhausted from battling the Chul, they had no time to stop for a rest, especially after their encounter with that maintenance worker in the drainage tunnels.
That little bugger Dumar must have doubled back towards Valen. Let's hope he hasn't alerted the city guards, Bonnie stated.
Aye, but I doubt they would get horses through the drainage systems. So if the city guards were after us, they too would be on foot, Thurnin responded. So we need to keep moving and put as much distance between ourselves and Valen. As they walked down the rocky moonlit beach,
It would be nice to at least get away from this beach, Bonnie said, glancing back the way they came.
Thurnin also took a look behind them before turning his gaze to the steep mountains which bordered the shoreline, and said, "It seems too steep to climb here. We'll have to continue along the shore for now, until we can find a road or somewhere we can climb." After several hours of walking along the shore, their pace slowed and the exhaustion was starting to get the better of both of them.
I think at this speed, if the guards were after us, they would have surely caught up by now, Bonnie stated, as she walked over to a small boulder and sat down. You can keep walking if you like, but I'm taking a break.
Thurnin stopped, looking back again. "I wouldn't be so sure about those guards," he said, "but a break is certainly in order." They sat for a few moments looking out at the sea.
Looks like quite a storm a-brewing out there, Bonnie said, gazing at the dark clouds in the distance.
"I'd hate to be stuck in that weather," Thurnin stated.
Well, I'd rather be at sea in a raging storm than on dry land any day, Bonnie retorted.
Then Thurnin stood and gazed westward a moment. "I think there is a dock a little further down the shore," he said.
Bonnie slowly stood from her rock and sighed. You better be right. My feet are aching.
They trekked further down the shore until they reached the little dock. It was just a small, simple wooden dock, and there were no boats tied to it, but around was a small sandy beach and a narrow dirt road zigzagging all the way up the steep hillside behind.
Finally, Thurnin stated, we can get away from this beach. Great, more walking, Bonnie complained. I don't know how all you landlubbers can handle all this walking.
They headed up the steep and treacherous trail, carefully traversing the difficult terrain until they reached the top of the hill. Atop the hill, the trail continued along a rocky pass and to a narrow rope bridge crossing a deep ravine. On the other side of the ravine was a dense forest.
Looks like you'll have your forests after all, Bonnie said, as she headed out onto the rickety old bridge.
Let's just take it slow and easy, Thurnin stated. This bridge is old and rotten, so watch your step. The old bridge creaked and swayed as Bonnie and Thurnin carefully walked across. Midway across, one of the planks beneath Thurnin snapped in half, and Thurnin nearly slipped through, but held tightly to the ropes until Bonnie was able to help pull him back up.
There they are!
A voice shouted in the distance. Looking back, a squad of 6 Valen guards had caught up to him, and was about to follow them across the bridge.
We got them now,
said another of the footmen as he lifted a crossbow and fired a bolt. Thurnin quickly ducked, dodging the projectile. Go, run for it, he said to Bonnie. 3 of the guards took aim with crossbows, while the other guards drew their swords and pursued them across the bridge.
It's all over now. Come peacefully, or we'll end you right here. As Bonnie and Thurnan continued to run across the rickety bridge, the guards began firing their crossbows at them. The first 2 shots missed, but just then, another of the bridge planks snapped, causing Bonnie to trip and slide into the gap. Just as she slid through, Bonnie managed to grab one of the bridge ropes. Thurnan stopped short of also stumbling through the gap and looked down at Bonnie as she dangled on the rope bridge. "This is your last warning," one of the footmen shouted as they drew nearer. Thurnan shifted his gaze back towards the approaching guards, then looked back at Bonnie and said, "Hang on," as he unsheathed one of his daggers. Grabbing hold of the rope bridge with his free hand, Thurnan slashed the ropes of the bridge, cutting it completely in half. Bonnie and Thurnan held tightly to the collapsing rope bridge as it swung across the ravine. The Valen guards, however, screamed as they fell from the bridge into the deep ravine. The remaining guards shouted curses and fired volleys of crossbow bolts from across the bridge, but Bonnie and Thurnan had already swung out of range of the crossbows. With a hard thud, Bonnie and Thurnan slammed into the rock face on the far side of the ravine, causing Thurnan to drop one of his daggers. But despite the impact, they nonetheless managed to hang on to the rope. After dangling a moment, Thurnan helped Bonnie to pull herself up, then slowly began climbing the remnants of the rope bridge until they reached the top. From there, the trail led them directly into a thick forest. Bonnie and Thurnan continued to follow the trail into the darkness of the forest. Within the dense forest, they were barely able to see by the moonlight, and at times nearly went off the trail into the bush. "I think we should be finding somewhere to camp for tonight," Thurnan stated. "Looks like there may be a clearing up ahead," Bonnie responded. They followed the trail a short distance further until they reached the ruins of a village. There was little more left of the village than rubble, mostly a few scattered crumbling walls overgrown by the brush and trees of the forest. After surveying the area, Bonnie and Thurnan settled for a spot to set up camp. It was the remnants of a small house. Although it was little more than 2 partially crumbled stone walls, it was, however, somewhat away from the main trail and was clear enough to make a small fire. Thurnan and Bonnie gathered some wood and dry brush. Then, using his remaining blade, Thurnan split a piece of the wood and carved a notch in the middle of the split wood. He filled the notch with dry grass and brush, then using another piece of cut wood, he rubbed it all together until the friction set the brush ablaze. Soon they had a small fire burning, and for the first time since they left Morgan's Inn back at Valen, they were able to rest a little. "We'll have to sleep in shifts," Bonnie suggested. "These forests are known to be inhabited by orcs and goblins looking to capture slaves to sell at Miran." "Good idea," said Thurnan. "Our campfire could have already alerted anyone nearby to our presence." "I'll take first watch," he volunteered. "Fine by me," Bonnie replied, as she lay down beside the fire and watched the flames dancing as she dozed off to sleep. After a couple hours, Bonnie awoke to Thurnan nudging her. "Bonnie, wake up," Thurnan said in a hushed tone. "Is it my watch already?" Bonnie asked as she opened her eyes. Then, as she started to sit up and her vision began to clear, she heard another voice.
"Don't be alarmed by my visage," it said. "I mean you no harm."
Bonnie looked up to see a terrifying skeletal woman seated across the campfire. She was little more than bones covered with the thin, withered skin, and was dressed in the black robes of a witch. Her long white hair seemed to be blowing about her by a wild wind which could not be felt, and a pair of red eyes burned within the empty eye sockets of her skull. Shocked by the ghastly undead witch sitting across the fire from her, Bonnie reeled back away in horror and climbed to her feet. "It appeared a few moments ago and asked for you by name," Thurnan said, placing a hand on Bonnie's shoulder.
"My name is Lavosin, and if you'll hear me out, Captain Windblade, I have something you may want," the creature said.
"And what might that be?" asked Bonnie.
"Hush,"
it replied. Casting Lavosin an inquisitive glare, Bonnie asked, "Oh, and where is this ship of yours? And how is it that an undead witch would just happen to have a ship at all?"
"Actually, I'm a lich now, and I not only have a ship, but I also have a crew to man your ship. It is hidden nearby, but alas, I am trapped here at these ruins, and cannot take you to it.
Levosin replied.
The wizards of Valen stole my phylactery, and used it to imprison me here at these ruins, as they tap my life essence for their own dark and perverted magics.
She explained.
If you can retrieve my phylactery from the wizard's tower in Valen, I will reward you with one of the mightiest ships Varen has ever known.
Then the lich reached inside her robes and produced a leather pouch about the size of a large apple, and tossed it to the ground in front of Bonnie. Bonnie slowly reached down, keeping her eyes locked upon Levosin. She lifted the pouch from the ground and opened it slowly, revealing a small fortune in gold coins. Then, Levosin removed 2 rings from her bony fingers and held them out in her hand.
Take these,
She said.
They will change your appearance so you may enter Valen undetected.
Bonnie reached out and quickly snatched the rings from the lich's cold dead hands.
Be careful,
Levosin warned.
The rings will fool the Valen guards, but experienced magic users will see through the illusion with ease.
Then, a large toad hopped out from behind some rubble. It croaked loudly, then slowly began to change. It grew to the size of a large cat. Its legs and arms stretched out, and sharp talon-like claws grew from its hands and feet. Long, thin horns grew from its head, and its face twisted into a terrifying bat-like visage. Finally, a long, thin tail grew from out its backside. The nightmarish creature stretched and stood partially upright, but hunched forward. It snarled and giggled as its eyes darted around quickly. "Get back!" said Thurnan, as he drew his dagger and brandished it towards the creature. The creature looked at Thurnan with its claws raised and hissed at him.
Do not be alarmed. This is Smurl,
said the lich.
He is a Quasit and my personal associate. Smurl will assist you with your mission. Now, if you still doubt me, then steal these gifts. Slay the Quasit, never return. But if you wish to once more command your own ship, then go back to Valen and return my phylactery to me.
I would be much more inclined to do the latter, if you gave me something a little more tangible than your word, Bonnie stated.
If you must see this ship, it's in a cave behind the waterfalls at the bottom of the ravine. You passed on your way here.
Levosin replied.
I've placed a powerful ward over it, so don't even think about trying to steal it. And don't get yourself killed trying to climb down there. I would very much prefer you live long enough to return my phylactery.
So be it, Bonnie stated. If this ship is where you say it is, I'll bring back your phylactery.
Then we have a deal,
Levosin said, as she pointed a bony finger at the campfire.
My phylactery will look like this.
Just above the flames of the campfire, the image of a slowly rotating, multifaceted red amulet wrapped in silver wire appeared. Each of the amulet's facets was inscribed with a different rune. After a moment, the image of the lich's phylactery faded away. Then the lich rose, and as she drifted away into the darkness, she said,
Return my phylactery, Captain Bonnie Windblade, and you shall have your ship.
Let me see some carnage. Honor, loyalty,
And that's chapter 14 of The Ridiculous Ballad of Skaaro the Red.
Night has fallen.
I'd like to thank everybody for listening. and tuning in tonight. And if you're enjoying the show, please continue to like, subscribe, thumbs up, upvote, and all that other stuff. And even just viewing, I see all your views, and it keeps me going. So I'm gonna keep writing this crazy story. And I got all sorts of more adventures with Skaaro and Huijin and Bonnie and aka Captain Windblade, and so much more to come in the future. And thanks for tuning in, and have a good evening.